Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's live Cascade Copper event. Today, I'm joined by President and CEO Jeff Ackert, who will be providing some further commentary on yesterday's press release. I encourage you to submit your questions in the chat, as there will be a live Q&A afterwards. Now, this event is being recorded and will be made available for viewing shortly after we conclude here today. With that housekeeping out of the way, Jeff, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks very much, Kyle. Pleasure to be here once again, and thank you everyone for joining us today. It'll be a quick review of the press release that was put out yesterday after market, and it's about our Copper Plateau project in British Columbia. We're quite keen to tell everybody about what we've uncovered with just going through the old historic data. Lots of it there, and it just really needed a good compilation, and that's what we've done. So if you don't mind, I will share my screen, and then we'll go through some of the points brought up in the press release, and I'll highlight what we think are the most significant. So stand by while I bring this up, and we're going to do this, and we should see that coming up there. There we are. So what I think what I'll start out with is basically some of the points at the top here. Maybe to preface that is that we basically acquired this project just over a year ago, and it had been sitting more or less on a shelf somewhere. It had been stuck in a shell company, and it hadn't really seen any attention, any love for, well, since 2010, I think, 2010, 2011. So, 13 years later, it's finally come back to light. And we put together all the geophysics, all the geochemistry that was on surface, all the historic drill holes. And what we've done is we've basically put it into a three-dimensional database. And what we're using is a Geoscience Analyst, a software that's provided by Mira Geoscience, and highly recommended. So what we've come up with here is really, it's extraordinary in the fact that there's some really nice, not only high-grade intersections, but also some long intersections almost from surface, well, right from surface in some cases. So if we look at the first point here, we've got some really good high-grade, as I mentioned, high-grade intersections, 62 meters of over 1% copper equivalent, and 71 meters of over 0.8 copper equivalent. So those are numbers that are quite extraordinary, not only worldwide, but also in British Columbia. British Columbia numbers don't really have to be that high to be economic. And if we take an example as Teck's Highland Valley, I mean, they're mining 0.2 copper. So with some of these numbers are quite extraordinary for sure. But also what we found with this exercise, with the compilation exercise, is that we're getting this great correlation between the magnetic responses, the induced polarization or IP chargeability, the copper and moly on surface molybdenum, which is also part of this mineralizing system. All of these things are really kind of coincident, and I'll explain that a little bit better with some of the graphics coming forward here. And it's also showing us where all of these things kind of come together. It's also showing us in the historic drilling that we've got some high grade and consistent mineralization of copper, moly, gold, and silver. So it's all cohesive now, and it's really what it's helping us do is plan for our next program. So we'll get into that a little bit later as well. So as I mentioned here, the modeling, the geophysics, and so on has really helped us out. And when I say modeling, what I'm saying is we're doing what's called inversion modeling of the geophysics. So it gives us a sort of an example of what is below the surface. The surface response is such, and then the modeling tells us what potentially could be the body beneath the surface that's giving us that response. So anyway, we'll go through it now. The first image I want to show people, it's quite colorful, but what does it mean? Well, the purple you're seeing there sort of underlying here, sort of this amorphous blob, is actually magnetic response, so magnetic susceptibility. And it's a model that shows what we might expect to see if we drilled beneath the surface. So where it's purple, it's highly magnetic, and where it's not, it's lower magnetics. So the implication here is that where we've done our drilling, which is in this area here, it's a little bit masked by the yellow, but in this area here, we've got a magnetic low sort of valley in the response. And what we're also seeing is magnetic lows further up to the northwest, where we've got copper and moly in soil sampling with no drilling or very little drilling, and also off to the southwest over on this side, and a little bit to the south here. So what that's telling us is that there's more to be found. We've got a great correlation between magnetic lows, soil samples, and in this case, where we've done a small IP survey, we've got IP chargeability. So it all is kind of coming together and telling us that there's much more to be found here. So what I'd like to do now is just go a little bit further down and look at also the location, just to make sure everybody knows where we are and what we're talking about here. And in this case, Copper Plateau is sitting here, and it's about halfway between Princeton and Penticton. You can see Kelowna is just up here in the Okanagan. But what's maybe more important is the location of some of the copper mines that are producing right now. For instance, Copper Mountain is just below us, just south of Princeton. Huge tonnage of reserves and resource. Teck, Highland Valley, as I mentioned before, it's sitting a little bit further north of Merritt. There's a couple of historic mines in the area. One is Nicola's Craigmont mine and the old Brenda mine. And they're all sort of lined up in this corridor here called the Quesnel terrain. And one of our neighbors, Kodiak Copper, which some of your audience may be familiar with, is just very close to us, about 40 kilometers away, and they're having some really good success, and have just announced a $5 million financing. Good for them, which is great. So that's the location. What I'd like to do now is just go to some of the other images here that kind of explain why we're quite excited about this this compilation and the numbers that are coming out of it. Now, there's a lot in this table here. There are a lot of numbers that I invite everybody to have a look at and see how high they can be. Now, the color code here is that the hotter the number, or the hotter the color, the higher the number. So, for instance, in number 16 here, we've got some very high copper equivalency numbers. This one is over 12 meters. And you can see the individual assays down through here are listed as well. So you can see where the complement is coming from, whether it's coming from mostly copper. In this case, there's quite a bit of silver, as you can see. I won't go through all of these because there's way too many to look at, but I think what it shows you is that we've got a great amount of high-grade intersections, but maybe one of the other ones I'd like to show you here too, which is quite interesting. If we look at this one here, which is hole number 36, if I'm not mistaken, yes. So here, right from surface, 3 meters below surface to 288 meters beneath surface down the drill string, we've got 265 meters of 0.22 copper. If you remember that number, that was a number that was very similar to what you saw at Teck's Highland Valley. So the point here being that we've got a long intersection, and not just in one hole, but in many other ones. We're getting this long intersection of constant mineralization, but within that, then we're getting some very decent high-grade numbers. So you can see here, there's it's like over 4% copper. Here we've got a 62 meter section of well over 1% copper. 25 meter, that's within this, is 25 meters at 2%. So you can see the numbers are quite high, and this is one of the reasons why we're very keen to get on the ground and do some work on this in 2025. So what does it mean? What do we want to do in 2025? Well, follow up on some of these things that have come to light in this three-dimensional compilation. And the first one is that we've realized to the south and southeast of the main ore body, and this image here, what you're looking at is a cross section. We're looking north, and we're seeing any intersection that was greater than 1% copper. So you can look at this and say, man, there's quite a number of them there. But what we're really keen on looking at are some of these ones that are sort of outliers that are further away from the main zone and haven't been followed up. So you can see in this area, we've got this one little section here from two drill holes, at least in this case, of some very nice over 1% copper here. And this one, again, 6 meters over 1% copper. And then even more importantly is some of the stuff down further, maybe beneath the main ore body itself, some wide intersections of plus 5% copper. So this has really got us excited about going back in there in 2025, following up on some of these intersections and do some drilling. And I'll show you where some of our targets are. The next one here, well, this is our targets for 2025 and beyond. This image here is really what it's telling us is there's the main zone, and you can see that it comes right to surface, which is fantastic. A lot of people now are out looking for the less low-hanging fruit. In other words, they have to go extremely deep. A lot of companies are drilling a kilometer below surface just to find the porphyry system. We're lucky in this case because it does daylight. It comes up to surface, and it makes making the resource a little easier. Eventual, if there's production, you've got a great open pit right near the surface. So very cost-effective mining when it comes to that. But what this image shows us is targets for follow-up drilling, and a few of them are deeper. But still, we're only looking at 200 to 250 meters below surface at the most deepest spot here. We've also got some areas that are very close to surface to follow up on those high-grade numbers that I mentioned just recently. And then also we've got a long strike to the northwest, a long strike to the southwest, and also a long strike to the south. So no lack of targets here at Copper Plateau. So you can see why we're quite excited about getting back into here and doing some work, especially the getting under, doing some drilling and getting under the surface and seeing what's there. Now this one, as I mentioned, this is a plan view now, so we're looking from above, looking down, and again we've got these purple magnetic renditions that show a high mag in purple, and anything that doesn't have the purple is in a valley or a low mag area. So you can see these trends of copper and moly mineralization on surface. There's 4 areas that we really need to follow up. One is the main zone, obviously here, and we've got the 3 others on each of the northwest, southwest, and to the southern area. So no lack of targets, as I mentioned. So I think really that's basically it. To sum it up, really is that the exercise of compiling the data, not just putting it on 2D, but putting it in 3 dimensions, really gives us a great visual of where the potential is going forward. So we see it along strike where there's copper and moly and soil, down dip and down plunge for the main zone, and then to the south and to the southwest as well. So Kyle, that's sort of it in a nutshell. I'll stop sharing the screen here, and if you or anybody in the audience has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Sounds good. Thank you for the thorough presentation. Yeah, just as a reminder, this is a live Q&A session, so please feel free to submit your questions in the chat. Upon registration, there was a few that were submitted here, so I'll start with those. First question, how deep are the high-grade intercepts shown in Figure 3, and what's their significance?
Yeah, I touched a bit on that, I think, but as I mentioned, the deepest holes drilled down the drill hole itself was about 350 meters. And if you put that in sort of in a vertical sense and you project it at vertical, it's about 250 to 260 meters below surface. So in the big scheme of things and the big scheme of porphyry systems, it's only sort of the tip of the iceberg, really. So the implication is that we're finding that the higher grade intervals in a couple of the holes in that area are showing us plus 1% copper, gives us the incentives that, yes, there's probably more down there. So the implication is that it opens the door for more drilling at depth in that direction.
Thank you. Another question here. Why is the combination of high chargeability, low magnetic intensity, and soil anomalies so effective for finding copper particularly?
Yeah, that's good. Because I really didn't explain what the implication is. I mean, it gives us great targets, but as a technical team, we understand what it is. But really what you're saying is that the magnetic low represents an alteration of the surrounding rock. The alteration is usually caused by the fluids that are coming up with the mineralization. So where you're getting this alteration of the surrounding rock, in this case, it's a intrusive system, the chances are that it's fluid from a porphyry system that's creating this alteration. But on its own, it doesn't really mean anything. You get a lot of mag lows in a lot of different areas, but when you layer on and put in context the IP, or the induced polarization chargeability anomalies, chargeability is telling us that there's sulfides within the system. So sulfides in this case could be pyrite, they could be pyrrhotite, they could be bornite. So anything metallic that keeps a charge in it as the induction goes in and releases it over time is saying, yes, there's sulfide. So the implication here is that the sulfides are copper bearing. We know that they're copper bearing because we've got the soil geochemistry on surface. So the soil geochemistry tells us we're in the right area. The chargeability tells us that there's sulfide mineralization, and the magnetic low tells us that there's alteration. So you put all of that together, it says more than likely you've got a very strong porphyry copper mineralizing system.
Several of the holes show high-grade molybdenum. Some, I think one was 1.536% moly. How does this affect your exploration strategy and potential economics?
Well, the strategy is that they're kind of coincident. Copper and moly, in this case, are coincident, as well as gold and silver. So when you do your soil sampling, you're going to look for all of those. So in some cases, you may not get copper, a huge copper anomaly, but you might get a good moly anomaly. So by implication, the moly is telling you that you're still within the system. And these mineralizing systems aren't just usually one pulse. So you've got one pulse of mineralization coming up through veining or hydrothermal fluid, then you've got another pulse coming up, and they kind of overlap over time. And some of these pulses might be more moly rich. So that's why we like to see moly. Moly is an integral part of these kinds of porphyry system. Now, as far as economics are concerned, it's a bonus really to have the molybdenum there, because moly prices are probably at all-time highs, as is gold and silver. So it really all adds together to create a deposit that doesn't rely on one commodity or one metal. It has a variety of them that allows us to take advantage of commodity prices across the board. So it's a real benefit for us.
So these are historic holes. Are you confident in the drill assay results from the previous drilling?
Yeah, that's always an issue with looking at historic work. And as I mentioned, the last work that was done is between 2008 and 2011, I believe, was some of the last work that was done. And we're lucky because the people that were doing the work, and I have to say it was a Terralogic out of Cranbrook, BC. They had the wherewithal to do a very good QA/QC program, which included blanks and CRM standards, duplicates, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's all well documented. We've reviewed it. We really like what they've done. And we're confident that in that case, those assays and the bulk of the ones that we're reporting here went through that rigorous QA/QC program. So we're very happy to see that. And of course, as we go forward, we'll be doing the same thing. And probably some of the first holes we drill might be looking at least in the first campaign, looking at twinning a couple of the older holes just to give us that much more confidence in what was done in the past. But we're really quite confident that the numbers we're looking at are real numbers.
Thank you for that. Here's a good question. Does this compilation and modeling of the Copper Plateau data and the targets generated from that change your opinion of this project?
Well, I'd say yes, it has changed it, and it's changed it for the better. You know, when you first look at a project and you kind of sift through the data and you get an impression from what you see, and it's partly scientific, obviously. You know, we saw some of the numbers, and there was a bit of a gut feeling there too, that, you know, it seemed to have, it had some legs to it, and some, you know, targets that hadn't been looked at. And now that we've gone through all of this and we've really kind of gone through it with a fine-tooth comb and put it through into this model, we're even more excited and more keen about this project. So I would say it's bumped it up in our priority of exploration projects to right to the top. So between this and our Rogers Creek project, and perhaps even our Centerfire project in Ontario, they're the top tier of our portfolio at this point. And you can't wait to really get out and do some work on it.
So let's talk about that. What's your timeline for the IP survey and drilling program?
I would say that, you know, probably within the second or third quarter of this year, is depending on the snow cover there. And you know, the first step would be to get on and do some IP on the ground. And I forgot to mention there, but basically we're looking at an IP coverage that covers not only the main zone, but also the northwest extension, the south and the southwest, and to give us a really cohesive target on where we want to go after, what we want to go after, and where we want to drill. And the drilling will then come after that. But of course, we need to also get out to the market. And I know we've had some really good response in the market today from this press release. 260,000 shares traded. So I think people I think they see what we've got here, and they're seeing what we're seeing. This is a fantastic project to get going. So maybe I'll just have a quick plug on, we do have an open financing at the moment. And if anybody's interested, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And you are getting the word out, if I'm not mistaken, you're heading to PDAC next week. So that's it for questions here, Jeff. So I'll let you do the closing remarks here, but anyone that's still around, the replay is available within the next couple of hours here if you came in a little late, but I'll pass it to you for any closing remarks.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. Yeah, so as I said, it was a great exercise to go through all of this data. In fact, you know, this is something that we try to do on every one of our projects. And you just can't do it overnight. It takes a bit of time, you know, and just being confident in what you're looking at and sifting through a lot of the older data and putting in some of the new stuff that we came up with on the ground. So I just invite the audience to keep track of what we're doing. If you want to subscribe to our newsletter, please go to our website and hit the subscribe button. And as Kyle mentioned, we're at PDAC this year. We're at the Investors Exchange. All 4 days, booth number 2805. So please come by and say hello.
Excellent.